The silly season in Formula 1 never ends. Last year there was so many drivers and teams, moving around. It was crazy to keep up with what was happening in Formula 1. I wouldn't say this year is as strong, but some big news came out of the American team, which is that Roman Grosjean and Kevin Magnussen have been re-signed for Haas. Now this is big news, as a lot of people, including myself and Jordan, thought that Roman Grosjean was going to be out of a drive. The man who's been at the team since 2016 has been there through their high points, including their first start to a race, 6th place, where they were the first constructor since 2002 with Toyota to score points in their first race in Formula 1. On the other hand, though, he's been through some bad times. 2018, he spun in Spain. He's had some big crashes and some big spins and some big, quite embarrassing moments for the team. And if you've watched Netflix's Drive to Survive, you will know that Roman Grosjean is not held as a high-ranking driver like he was when he came into Renault. All young guns and the progress that he made at Lotus. But yeah, he's been re-signed for 2020, and he'll be alongside Danish driver Kevin Magnussen, the guy who came into Haas in 2017, replacing Mexican driver Esteban Gutierrez. He's impressed. He's had some good finishes. He might be known more for the "suck my balls, honey" against Nico Hulkenberg, and recognise that name, as we'll be getting onto that in a little bit. So as I've just said, they have been confirmed. The 2 Haas drivers will be here till 2020. So we're going to kick this episode off by talking about that. But before we get into anything, we have to say about the guys that are with us on this episode. These guys called Mike and Ash are with the YouTube channel called F1 Fanatics. Now, we're quite friendly with them. We've been on their episode a few weeks ago. We talked about the Belgian Grand Prix and Max and things like that. So guys, welcome to the channel. It's good to have you on, and obviously collaborations seem to be the way forward on YouTube nowadays.
Yeah, it is, and thanks for having us on. It's something we've been wanting to do for a little while, so it's good to actually get involved, and the discussion topics today definitely very interesting ones, I'd say, considering the news we've been having today.
Yeah, and hopefully we can offer some kind of differing and maybe controversial opinions, so it gets people talking out there, because it's certainly something that I think has made people talk, that's for sure, and it's upset some people, made some people very happy.
Yeah, definitely. It's a big topic. We've got some big news coming up. Ahead of the Singapore Grand Prix as well. This is where silly season is kind of in full force. So obviously, welcome to the show, guys. Thanks for being on the show with us. Obviously, they're on the YouTube channel. Please go and subscribe to them if you haven't already. But watch this episode first and see what we have to say on the matter. So to kick it off, obviously with Haas being signed, that's one less team that any free agents, any Formula 2 drivers can go to, and anyone who hasn't been signed in Formula 1. So Roman being signed. My first all opinions is that I did like him as a driver. I was a fan of him in probably 2012, especially that year when he was known as the crash kid. His career wasn't going as strong as he'd have wanted it to be. But a lot of people had a lot of faith in Roman, this young gun. He started with Renault, then went to Lotus, and obviously had most of his highlights of his career at Haas. A few success here and there, a few podiums, never a race win, but some good progression with that team. Really the start of the American team since it came into the sport in 2016. Kevin Magnussen, head down, known as one of the bad boys and one of the most likeable figures in Formula 1, does what he has to do in the team. No funny business, and we all really like him. There was no real doubt that he would be there until next year, but Roman is the big one. So guys, Roman Grosjean, are you surprised that he was signed for 2020? Because, to be honest, in my mind, it didn't look like he was going to stick around. That the team had lost a bit of faith in him. This 2016 American dream and Roman, the amazing driver from Lotus, can pull us in the right direction and kind of worn off. So, were you surprised that he was re-signed for next year alongside Kevin Magnussen?
Do you want to start, Ash, or do you want me to go?
Well, you can go first.
I
did last time, so
look at this. I'll go first this time. For me, taking all factors into account, I'm not really surprised by it. I think, which hasn't really been touted or talked about too much, is I think losing that Rich Energy sponsorship, although obviously after that kind of debacle that happened pre-Silverstone, it always was a relationship that was going to end. I think that puts Haas in a compromising financial position, and they're always a team that's operated on a budget. And obviously Nico Hulkenberg, we don't know how much these drivers are on, but I think it was being touted that he might have been on them both, Magnussen and Grosjean combined. So for Haas to find that sort of money and commit to a guy he's got to be a lot better than Roman Grosjean. And I think consistency-wise, obviously he's a hell of a lot better than Roman Grosjean. But if you're going to invest that much in someone, I think they'd only really want to do that if someone like a Sebastian Vettel came on the market and was in a midfield team for some reason. I don't think Nico Hulkenberg is that much of a step up on Roman Grosjean. And Roman Grosjean, he's had that loyalty factor. He's been with the team ever since, from day one. He shows that if he gets in positions, his high days, I reckon, are kind of 8, 9s out of 10s, where the Kevin Magnussen's and the Nico Hulkenbergs for me are the 6, 7s out of the 10s, consistent performance. So for me, it wasn't a surprise, but I feel that's maybe slightly a controversial opinion.
See, I'm actually going the other way. I was quite surprised that they did decide to stay with Roman Grosjean. It's that consistency factor. Haas are a team where they are needing to get as much money as possible from the Constructors' Championship. So to have a driver in the car that you can't always guarantee a finish, because there is still that recklessness and naivety to some of the moves that he tries to pull off. I just thought they were going to take a step away to another driver like a Kevin Magnussen, where you can guarantee that when the opportunities are there, they were going to be scoring the points. But I can also see the reasons why they have stuck with Roman Grosjean as well. For them, budget-wise, can they afford to take that risk on a more expensive driver? Probably not. And Roman Grosjean knows the team, so it's one of those where they aren't going to have that settling in process that, say, Renault have had this season with Daniel Ricciardo. So going forward, it probably was the smarter decision to stick with what you know.
Yeah, exactly. So that was a big topic that came out. Jordan, getting your views on this. But first, before we just hear about Haas, the main thing is we made a video about where we talk about, the trades and the silly seasons, and we said that a certain Nico Hulkenberg was going to be going to Haas. Now, Nico Hulkenberg, of course, was dropped from Renault. This was following French driver Esteban Ocon being signed alongside Daniel Ricciardo from Australia. That was big news. It was good to have Esteban back, but Nico Hulkenberg, he's now going to be out of a drive. Now, Nico Hulkenberg, on this channel, we call him the Mr. Nearly man. The man who, he always finishes 11th, he always finishes, in the last few years, he might get, 4th and things like that. He just gets outside of what's needed of him, mainly the points. And he's never there. He was running in the points. He was running in the podium position. in Germany. Had a crash where he went off at basically the ice ring in Sector 3. Just missed out on the podium there. So as I say, really, he's nearly everywhere. Nearly in the points. Nearly in the podium. And he nearly gets what he was basically brought into Formula 1 in 2010 to do. The man won the GP2 series and basically was on a storm as a kid. Was brought into Formula 1 in 2010 with Williams and got one pole position to show for that. And that is what, fast forward the clock 9 years, and that is what he is still sitting on. He might have had a win with Le Mans, but that's obviously a different series. He still sits on one pole position in Formula 1 with Williams. But nevertheless, people still back him as this kid who can win Formula 1 races, who can win championships, and maybe that's all died off, Jordan. So, as I say, now he's lost his Renault seat. It was running out for teams to go with him. And in that prediction video, Jordan, we said that Nico was going to go to Haas. Of course, the door is closed on him. So what do you think about the Haas signings? And do you think Nico might have been a better person at the team? And also, where is the German driver going to go? Because, as I say, time is running and teams are running out for the Hulk in Formula 1.
You won't be happy with this, for sure. I think they certainly would have had talks between Haas and Nico Hulkenberg at some point. They even said that it's between Grosjean and Hulkenberg. I remember Verline's name was there or thereabouts. Apparently he offered his role to the team, but they kind of rejected him more or less straight away. Like he's got tied up with Ferrari, being their simulator driver. So, and again, Haas having the Ferrari engine. There's ties in there, but I think Haas also said that they didn't want to take on a rookie driver. So it was more or less going to be Grosjean or Nico Hulkenberg. But it was actually me that said Hulkenberg would be going to Haas in that prediction video, because I had a strong feeling that Ocon would be going to Renault because he was almost in the door at Renault until Ricciardo kind of barged him out the way. And there was rumours all the way around it. And the reason why I said Hulkenberg to Haas was because I seen a rumour on Twitter that I thought that actually makes a little bit of sense. So I said it as a risk, and I got a lot of backlash of it. If you read the comments on that video, I was like, everyone was like, "What are you smoking?" Like, "Oh, like that's just bizarre." And then about a few days after that, everyone was like, "Oh, Hulkenberg to Haas, Hulkenberg to Haas." Oh, it's become more and more apparent. And then when Ocon and it was announced going to Renault, that's when the rumours got even stronger, and then it became more or less that Nico Hulkenberg was going to go to Haas, and I'm thinking, "Oh my God, I'm going to get some good predictions here. My predictions are going to be right." But obviously, exactly.
Finally right for once, John.
As always, my hopes and dreams come crashing back down to earth. But my initial reaction when I first seen the headline, I was shocked. I was very, very surprised. Now, this is before I've read why Haas haven't really chosen Nico Hulkenberg. Like, now I kind of understand why they haven't, but when like I said, when I first seen it, I was very surprised. I was absolutely certain Nico Hulkenberg was going to go to Haas. Romain Grosjean, he hasn't had a good couple of years, has he? He's odd, one or two times he would be like, he'll have a very good Grand Prix, he'll have a very good performance. 9 times out of 10, he won't do. However, this season, I believe he's had more DNFs, mechanically wise, not crashes, mechanicals, than anybody else, which Haas would have definitely taken into consideration. And they also would have put them, if you take all them mechanical problems out and put his results alongside K-Mag's, maybe K-Mag might have edged it a little bit, but Grosjean would have been there or thereabouts on K-Mag's level, which is where he should be, because that's all you can really put Grosjean on is his teammates' level, because you can't really put him on anywhere else really, because let's face it, that car is awful. It's absolutely awful. And Haas will be very, very disappointed with this. So, and also in that sense as well, keeping those two drivers to try and develop the car for next season rather than getting someone else in to get them settled and try to build a new car, it would just off balance everything next season. So I think keeping two drivers and getting the car sorted for next season is a bit better. See where they are next season, and then in 2021, I'm almost certain that they will get a brand new driver in. Who that driver will be, I have absolutely no idea. I know Mick Schumacher's name's floating about, but I really don't think Mick will be going to Haas in 2021. But watch the space. Who knows? But in regards to Nico Hulkenberg, where's he going to go? It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because Nico Hulkenberg is, like you said, Lyle, he's been in Formula 1 for about 9-10 years now. He's only got one pole position. Let's face it, that is not good enough for a driver like Nico Hulkenberg. He was supposed to be coming into Formula 1 as GP2 champion in 2009, I think he was. And you got that pole position, blinding pole position in Brazil. That was incredible, and everyone was like, "Oh, this kid's got something." And I've always said that I do give a bit of leeway to Hulkenberg, because he's never really been in a car that was ever there or thereabouts, to go and win races, to be on podiums or whatever. But really, Perez, I think Perez got 6 podiums at Force India when they were teammates, and Hulkenberg didn't get any. Which I'm like, well, hang on, why? Hasn't Hulkenberg got a podium in that duration when Perez has? So again, that raised a couple of eyebrows, but I've always been like a bit lenient on him. But I do want to kind of throw in a bit of a bombshell. Now, a lot of people were saying the Alfa Romeo seat, which I'm like, Giovinazzi's got that in the bag. Everyone's saying, well, a few people are saying the Williams seat. For me, no, I don't think so. Again, with the whole salary thing that Mike was on about before, Williams don't want that. They want someone bringing in the money, not giving out the money. And Hulkenberg's wage will be a lot. So Williams, for me, no way. Latifi is going to be in that seat, definitely. Even though we all say Grosjean definitely won't be in Formula 1, but he is. But Latifi will be there next season. And then there's been talk of him going to Toro Rosso, which I think is just rubbish. Cast your mind back to Monaco this season. The rumours floating about back then was that Hulkenberg was rumoured to be going to Red Bull, which I'm thinking, yes, we did. Which I was like, we even did a collaboration with Chazza HD about it, Chazza F1 HD. We went on his channel to speak about it, and I kind of said, I can see where they're coming from, but no, I don't think so. Now, I'm not saying I'm sure about it, but I think it's more possible now than it was back then, because no one's confirmed for that Red Bull seat next season. I know Albon's there, but Albon's not confirmed for next season, alright? Now, what if Albon has a dreadful last 7 races. What do Red Bull do? Exactly.
Yeah, like Pierre Gasly.
They won't go back to Gasly. They won't go back to Kvyat. And probably Albon won't be there if he has an awful last few races. So who do they go with? A guy with experience. A guy that can fill that seat for a couple of years. Nico Hulkenberg. So, my question to you guys is, for now anyway, do you see Nico Hulkenberg going to Red Bull now, or do you think no, that's ridiculous now? Even now, it's still ridiculous. I'll start with you from Fanatics. What do you think?
Well, the one thing I would say about the Red Bull seat wasn't it last week that Franz Tost came out and said that he doesn't think he will be seeing Alexander Albon back at Toro Rosso. He thinks that it does now mean that he will be getting the seat in for Red Bull next season. But I agree with you in some aspects. There's only 5 seats that haven't been confirmed for next season. He won't get the Alpha seat. Nicholas Latifi is pretty much getting that Williams seat. And I would say that 2 out of the 3 seats at the Red Bull Toro Rosso are already secure. So in our prediction videos, I actually had Hulkenberg leaving F1 for next season because I just had a feeling it was going to be his terms and he just didn't want to be continuing within the environment. I was actually seeing him going back to the World Endurance Championship. Lyle mentioned he did win the Le Mans in 2015 and that was his first attempt at it. So I just had the feeling that he would go into a different category, probably the World Endurance Championship, and do a full season there. The other one I put out there was the potential for him going into DTM. So for me, I just don't think Formula One is the environment for him to be in now, just because of the whole bad blood situation, I would say, with Renault. The fact that he was saying that things changed and he knew before the announcement that he wasn't going to be retained. Then Gunther Steiner coming out and saying it's between Hulkenberg and Grosjean for the Haas seat and that going against him. I just think it is a case now where the opportunities don't seem to be there for him to find one, which I think is a disappointment because I like Hulkenberg as a driver, and I do think if you were to put him in one of those top 3 cars, you would see the performance there that definitely Gasly hasn't given Red Bull. I think Hulkenberg would definitely have been outperforming what he would have been given, and to some extent I feel as a number 2 driver in a Ferrari or a Mercedes, he would have been given those consistent results that have been seen from the wingmen, shall we say, of like Valtteri Bottas or Kimi Raikkonen last season. So he just needed to have that step up to a car, and that never materialised for him. So I think he's going to take that step away, and another category would be the best step for him.
For me, I can't see him staying in Formula 1, and I can't see him in that Red Bull seat. For me, I know Helmut Marko does have this kind of crusade against Daniel Kvyat ever since the torpedo incident with Vettel, but I think they wouldn't be able to ignore Daniel Kvyat's performances this year, and if Albon doesn't perform up until the level that he doesn't secure the seat, I think that seat will go to Daniel Kvyat, because they've already announced that they would prefer to make that an internal appointment, and I actually think Daniel Kvyat's a better driver than Nico Hulkenberg. He's got a definitely better ceiling to improve at. I think if people have been watching me recently, Daniel Kvyat's been growing on me more and more this season, and he's also a guy, he does have more podiums than Nico Hulkenberg at this point in his career as well, and still only 25. Nico, for me, obviously his big shot he was hoping to get was when Kimi Raikkonen got the Ferrari seat, and I feel him and Grosjean are going to be both nearly men in Formula 1, where they looked and they had really promising junior careers, and it's going to be well, maybe, in terms of it, they'll look back and go, I could have done better if I did this there, here. I think the fact that Nico Hulkenberg hasn't been able to secure one of his podium positions chances throughout his career to date, that isn't just unlucky, that is also down to him as well. In those situations, I think Red Bull will look at that, and they've been ruthless with their own drivers, so you can bet if they're going to go for an external driver, he better be damn good, and I don't think Nico Hulkenberg fits that category. So for me, it would be, if you want to say single-seater racing, he'll look at Jean-Eric Vergne and how well he's done in Formula E, so maybe a seat he'll look to pursue there, or like Ashley said, the WEC I think would be a good championship for him to perform in, with obviously previous success in Le Mans.
Yeah, exactly. Nico Hulkenberg to Red Bull, obviously, we did discuss it in a video. So the main thing is for Red Bull for me is, and I've talked about it loads, is that Max Verstappen is going for the 2020 World Championship. The guy who is sitting to the right of him needs to be somebody who can support the team and support Max, the guy who's going to be bringing in these points, and not just, Max at the front and whoever it else is in the midfield. It needs to be somebody strong. Now, what Red Bull have done, of course, by switching out all the drivers is just absolutely, it's like a big kerfuffle. Really, quite aggravating as well sometimes. I was a big Pierre Gasly fan as well, and I still am. I'm still giving the support to Toro Rosso, but at Red Bull, I thought Pierre was made. I loved him at Toro Rosso in 2018, and he'd finally found a home in 2019. Also, kind of comparing that to why Nico Hulkenberg stayed around so long, is that Pierre didn't have a pole position, fine. But he was hard. He was in 1.5 seasons of Formula One. Nico was in 10 seasons of Formula One. So I'm thinking, if Pierre Gasly wasn't given his shot, how is now Nico Hulkenberg given his shot, and how has he gone on for so long at Force India and Renault having a shot? But anyway, yeah. So whoever gets that seat needs to be someone to support Max and support the team. As I say, they're going for drivers, and they're also going for the constructors. In terms of who I think will be in that seat in 2020, it is such a big mind-up. The story was that the drivers at Toro Rosso, the 3 drivers, so Pierre Gasly, Alexander Albon, who's obviously being promoted now, and Danny Kvyat, they were kind of going to, one was going to take a bit, one was going to go up to bat, and then the other one was going to swap in, and then the other one was going to swap in. So Danny's already had his chance. Pierre Gasly was going to have his chance. He's already had his chance. Now he's going back to Toro Rosso, and now Alexander Albon's having his chance. And then Helmut Marko was going to choose at the end of that, after so at the start of 2020 season, who was going to, who basically hit the best curveball, who did a home run at the bat. And they were going to choose that. So I think that I think that all 3 of those drivers have been at Red Bull. They have the experience to, one of them, to go back and achieve what they haven't done in that career that was kind of cut short at the team. Nico Hulkenberg, of course, brings a lot of experience, but when I say a lot of experience, he brings experience in Formula 1, but as I say, 1 pole position, that's nothing. Max Verstappen has way more than he has, and Max has been in, about a quarter of the time Nico Hulkenberg has, maybe even less. And of course he has more pole positions. He has more driver wins and points and everything. A lot of people actually do as well. It's crazy. So I don't think that Nico's going to be at Red Bull. I think it's going to be one of those 3 drivers. In my mind, I'd like it to go back to Pierre Gasly, because I'm a big fan, and you might have known what I'm about to say now, which is I've already bought his top. So Red Bull need to either refund us for that, or they need to put Pierre Gasly back in that seat. So I hope that's Pierre Gasly, but it's definitely going to be one of those 3 drivers. It might be Alexander Albon. He might be able to retain it. I've got him on the podium for this weekend in Singapore, so you never know, might be him. But Nico Hulkenberg definitely not to Red Bull. There is options in Formula 1, obviously Alfa Romeo, but that is very slim. Antonio Giovinazzi and Kimi Raikkonen are both performing very well. Most likely going to be signed for next year. But I just want to quickly open up the Williams side, or the Williams talk about it. Now, of course, Nico Hulkenberg has won Le Mans with Porsche at WEC. The chances of him going back there are very high. But he'll want to stay in Formula 1 for as long as he can, and he'll want to be pushed before he jumps. That's what I think. I think he'll want to wait until the very last second to say, I want to stay in Formula 1 until he's basically forced to go. Some other big news broke before the Singapore Grand Prix as Robert Kubica, the Polish driver from Williams who made a return earlier this season alongside George Russell, has announced his retirement in Formula 1. Now, he made a return the second time in F1. He had a good career with Renault back in the early days of Formula 1. He had quite a few wins, including his massive crash in the 2008 Canadian Grand Prix with Sauber. Now, he went through that. It was a good career that the Polish guy had. Left, and then a year later in a rallycross accident had quite a big impact, where it was worrying about, you know, what would he do, and we were all kind of sending our thoughts and prayers through to him. A few years later, he did make a full recovery, and then he started a testing job with Renault and then subsequently Williams in F1. He was then signed for the 2019 season alongside British Formula 2 champion George Russell, and they started the season well. So Williams, of course, it's not going to be great. Back of the grid, 19th and 20th, until a very strange result came for the Polish driver, where he managed to get a point after the German Grand Prix. So Robert Kubica sits at the 19th position in the table with 1 point when George sits on 0. It wasn't great for him. He was getting lapped, and of course it wasn't a great kind of shadow of what he once was in Formula 1. Heading into the press conference of the Singapore Grand Prix, he announced his retirement from Formula 1, that at the end of the 2019 season he would step down from Williams and go into retirement. Now, again, in part 1 we were talking about Nico Hulkenberg possibly going to Williams, and what is the situation there? Well, of course that situation is a lot easier now that he has moved on. But now we're going to be talking about Robert Kubica, and, you know, what was he like in the second part of his career. Now, I will say, granted, that when he first came onto the scene in about, you know, midway through 2017, it was actually after the Hungarian Grand Prix in 2017, in the mid-season test that they did at the Hungaroring, he tested for Renault, and that's when he first came back onto the scene. There was a lot of talk about him getting back into Formula 1, of which I was like, do you think he's the right person? I don't think he's probably the right fit for F1, especially when obviously teams are now going for the young guns, you know, Charles Leclerc's, Max Verstappen's, people who are, you know, well, some of them are even teenagers, you know, Lando Norris is still a teenager in Formula 1, so they're going for that kind of, you know, the young blood. But then Robert Kubica, who obviously has been in Formula 1 before, you know, in his mid-30s, is going to make a return to F1. Didn't really see it myself. He then moved to Williams as a test driver, and then, yes, was signed for the team. Obviously, those two replacing Sergio Sorokin and Lance Stroll at Williams. He then partnered George Russell. Pretty good from him. Obviously, he got the best out of the car. Definitely the experience in the team. Obviously, when George might have been the faster kind of young gun driver, just won the Formula 2 World Championship the previous year. George was more of the calm-headed but the experienced guy who knew what Formula 1 was like. Even the best person, even the Lewis Hamilton in that Williams car, couldn't get it to, you know, get in the points very much or get it on pole position or whatever. So I'd say it's been a good career, a good second part from Robert. He's thought that it is definitely time to end his Formula 1 career for the second time, obviously after only 1 year in the seat. Also opening the floodgates for people to take that seat. For example, F2 Canadian driver Nicholas Latifi, who obviously is very high up in the rankings, Williams test driver, and someone that we have discussed for getting that seat, and of course Nico Hulkenberg that we've just discussed earlier on in the episode. Robert moving on, I do think that is a good move for him. It was good to see him in Formula 1, obviously an old name, an old soul, back in obviously the days when we were just getting into Formula 1, but yeah, I just think that his return wasn't the best, and probably what he didn't expect, especially how slow that Williams car actually was. So guys, F1 Fanatics, I'm bringing you in. Obviously Robert Kubica, a great guy to have in Formula 1, but that Williams car really not showing him the grace that he should have had on his second run through Formula 1. What do you take about Robert Kubica's career as a whole? You know, how he did in the first part, obviously getting over his crash, which of course is one of the most heroic things, getting back in the car, and obviously driving a season so far with Williams.
Well, first of all, I admire him, like where he come from with the accident itself. Like the barrier actually punctured the car. It was an awful crash, and considering some of the crashes we see nowadays, it was a brave thing for him to do to get back into racing, let alone taking that step up and coming back into Formula 1. If I'm honest, I was a little bit sceptical about him coming back into Formula 1. I thought it was a bit more of one of those feel-good factor stories that a team was using to be able to get sponsorship, have the attention on them and see where they could go from there. But it was also a match that was made in heaven, really, because it allowed Kubica to have that opportunity to prove to himself that despite the limitations that he has, because that's what he calls them, he was still able to get his seat in Formula One and to be able to drive a Formula One car. And for Williams, it meant last season they were already in a state where they were going to be at the back of the grid, so they were able to get an experienced head into the car in Robert Kubica to allow them to push on with the development side of things and to be able to get that feedback. It definitely wasn't the return Kubica would have been expecting in Formula One. He's only finished ahead of George Russell twice. He hasn't out-qualified him, I don't think. I can't remember.
He hasn't, no.
And as you said, the main thing, he got his point in Germany, but that was also down to the fact that the two Alphas got penalties. So it wasn't a return that was wanted, and it is one of those where it's not the return fans would have wanted for him. You're looking at it and you're thinking you want him to have a successful return to Formula One and be able to compete consistently, but he's in a car that just hasn't got the ability to. So I think it is the right thing for him to now take that step back, because he has, as I said, he's proved what he wanted, that he could get back into Formula One, but he's come out and said he wants to find that joy in racing again, and the only seat that would be available to him would be staying at Williams, and I don't think he's going to be able to get that joy from the car. So it's been an amazing career for him. I just think it's the right time for him to take that step back from Formula One now.
I think Lewis Hamilton summed it up perfectly in his press conference where he said he was inspirational, and actually if you look back at interviews and how he talks about Robert Kubica, of how highly he rated him, and I think as much as nowadays we probably talk about Leclerc and Max Verstappen as world champions in the making, pre-accident Robert Kubica was obviously being touted as a future world champion in the making, and he was a superb driver, and it is inspirational and it is amazing that he's been able to get back to this level, the pinnacle of F1. Yes, there may have been some elements of maybe a feel-good story to it, but he still needed to be at some sort of level that he could prove that he was able to get that F1 car round. I think a lot of factors have worked against him. The F1 cars have changed so much since he was in it before the accident. Obviously the introduction of the Pirelli tyres, and you've obviously got the juniors coming up like his teammate like George Russell, who's only experienced the Pirelli tyres and has got used to kind of getting the best performance out of them, and we've all seen across the teams this year, especially how difficult these set of Pirelli tyres are to get in the right temperatures to gain the performance you need. Yeah, he's been amazing. He needs to find that love of motorsport again. I think for him, he was linked earlier in the week, I think shared it on Twitter, Audi, who obviously are dominant, they dominated the DTM as a manufacturer this year, are in talks with him to moving across to DTM. And I think if he wants to get out single-seater racing, I think that would be a really good series for him, because I think the DTM cars would be slightly easier to work around his limitations from the accident. And Audi, obviously a great manufacturer, and well, I think both me and Ash have followed it a little bit more closely since we went and saw it at Brands Hatch this year, and it is actually a very good series of racing, and in far of those kind of GT series stuff, it is a very high level racing still, so he could still become a champion within that and still have a very successful latter part to his career. But yeah, a fantastic driver. Shame that it was taken away from him, but there's still opportunities for him going forward in motorsport.
Yeah, for me, this one wasn't exactly a big shock when they announced it as well. It was like, right, yeah, we kind of seen it coming as well. A lot of us did think that Robert wouldn't be in Formula One next season, and not because like of his driving ability, because like as you know, the the Williams car is just terrible. So there's only limited things he can do in that car, can't he? Like he's only battling for like 19th at best, if he can get ahead of his teammate who is a lot more experienced. But like when he came back into Formula One, I remember a lot of people were thinking that Kubica was going to be was like going to be the old Kubica, like when he was back in his days in Sauber and in Renault. And I'm sitting there going, "Oh, okay, let's think about this." Like as you just said there before about the cars. The cars have changed a lot since he last drove competitively in Formula One. He's come up against his teammate, who is a GP2 champion, a GP3 champion, and also he's more prepared for Formula One than Robert Kubica, because Kubica's only been getting back competitively, or driving the cars rather, the new spec cars, for about 2.5 to 3 years. Whereas like George has had more, as like you said, better experience on the Pirelli tyres, how a modern day team works. He's had obviously practice rules before in the team, and then he's just more prepared. Like you would expect him to be coming through the ranks. Like Kubica had a long way away from Formula One. Flirted with the idea of coming back. I remember when those rumours were circulating about 2016, 2015, when he got back into rallying. Again, that was so inspirational as well. And I thought everyone was like, that's probably the best he's going to get. But then to get back to Formula One is just incredible, absolutely incredible. Williams I think, deserve a lot of credit, not just them, but Renault as well, for allowing Robert to be obviously in their car, to give him time to get used to driving a Formula 1 car again, and for Williams for giving him a punt, really, because yes, there are like you said, limitations to his driving as well, obviously with his right arm being the way it is. But I think Robert has done the best he can do in that car, and I'm so disheartened that he's worked so hard not just to get back into Formula One, but in the motorsport, and this is where he ends up at the back of the grid, and he doesn't want that next year, and he's like, right, I want to be in another series where I can feel like I've been competitive. And if he does go to DTM, which I think would be a really good series. I've seen someone mention Formula E, but I really can't see him going to Formula E, if I'm totally honest with you. But I think DTM would be a brilliant option for him. Let's see how he does there. It's like you guys were saying, like DTM cars are much easier to handle. I don't really follow DTM that closely, but I'll take your word for it. And like hopefully reignite that fire, the fire that he once has. But a lot of people who are, let's say do have limitations with maybe with a disability, or they might have, like for example Billy Monger, like he's got obviously he had a double leg amputation after his big crash, and he's trying to get into motorsport as well. And that IndyCar driver, is it Robert Wickens? I think it is. Again, he was paralysed for a bit, and now he's working his way up, trying to get back into driving as well. So those people will take inspiration from Robert, thinking, well, if Robert didn't do what he did, they probably would have been like, I'll try and do what I can, but I might not be able to get back to where I was. But they will look at Kubica's story and go, well, of course I can do it. I've got the belief that, if you can put your mind to it, you can do it, and that's what Robert did. It's been amazing as well for him to get back in F1. And it's one of those moments where what could have been of Robert Kubica. Could he have been a world champion? Could he have been a multiple race winner? Like, he was tipped for big things in Formula One when he came into the sport. Like, he was on the same level as Hamilton. I think a lot of people were saying that he was quicker than Hamilton. He could beat Hamilton. And like when he won that Grand Prix in Canada in 2008, that was a big moment, and everyone was like, here we go, we've got a really good driver on our hands. But I think Kubica's legacy in Formula One will be a very inspirational one. I think he will be missed in the paddock as well, but ultimately this is probably a good decision. He doesn't want to be at the back, and in the next few days we should be welcoming Latifi into the team. But yeah, that's my thoughts on it.
Well, maybe
on Nico
Hulkenberg. But yes, also, I mean, as John said, he is definitely an inspiration. But he's also an inspiration because, as I said before, teams are looking at the young guns, the teenagers, the young adults, to get into Formula One. But Williams did the kind of the opposite. Or there was two ends of the pole. You had George Russell, young gun, 20 years old, F2 champion. And then you had Robert Kubica, obviously an old guy, making his return. But yes, obviously good, you know, it was a good career that he did. Williams obviously should be very grateful for obviously
Yeah.
well done Williams for giving him that opportunity. So anyway guys, that's where we're going to wrap up the episode. Thank you very much for watching. A very special episode. Obviously thank you very much to Mike and Ash from
you, guys.
F1 Fanatics. We've been on their episode before. Obviously work quite closely with them. They're a great channel. Please go and subscribe to them if you haven't already.
We'll be leaving links to their channel
stay
in the
tuned on our
description
channel
below as
for-
well, and a couple of their videos as well. So certainly, please go and check them guys out. Please do.
Thank you so much, guys, and thank you so much for having us on. Obviously, yeah, us only just started 2 months out, and you guys a lot more experience in the game. But I like to think we've said before, we're just F1 fans, and we just love chatting. But it's such a kind of big opportunity to come on to a channel like yours, and we're really grateful that you've given us the time and stuff. Guys, if you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe to the F1 Debate Show. They're on that last charge to 1,000, and it's just kind of a bit of nice recognition for the hard work that they put in, because yeah, these guys put so much effort into their videos and produce really great content. I think me and Ash both agree on that.
Yep.
Yeah, and I just echoing what Mike said, appreciate you having us on the channel. Would love to have you back onto ours for another video at some point. Absolutely. And seeing whether we can get a few of these going, and just being able to continue that F1 discussion, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for those words. I'm sure we can get something sorted. I'm sure we'd absolutely love to be back on your channel and vice versa. So yes, it's been a special episode for that, and obviously, by the way, and also our slogan is we are two lads that like watching cars go around in circles, so we just like Formula 1 like the guys at F1 Fanatics do. Thank you very much for watching this episode. Stay tuned for more content, and until next time guys,
guys,
we'll see you later.